Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Mark C. Favor, and we're going to be talking about his book, Lessons from the Admiral, Naval Wisdom and Sea Stories of Leaders. Mark, this really pulled me in when I got a copy. You are, I mean, we were just talking it before we went live. You are such a storyteller. And there's so many things in here that you can learn from a leadership perspective. It's just a lovely leadership book. It's not a massive book, so people can read it, over a weekend or stuff. Before we get in and talk about it, where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, Tim. Everybody can find me on the website, markcfava.com. That'll get you to the book and a contact me form and an email. So love to hear from folks, not only about what they think about the book, but just to connect with them.
So, I mean, I always ask this question, and I've been dying to do it because we've been waiting in the side room for a few minutes. What was the inspiration behind the book?
The inspiration was when I finished this job, what I learned in this job stayed with me. It stayed with me in my next job in the military, in my reserves, in my legal career, and even today as a corporate lawyer and as a law firm partner. And I finally decided during the pandemic, it was time to write it down, time to write all that stuff down. It took me 2 years to do it. And I'm excited to get it out there. That was the inspiration.
So for context, do you want to explain to people what the book's about and the role that you took? Because I think that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people, when they see the book on LinkedIn or otherwise, they'll say, "Hey, congratulations, Admiral, on a great book." And I can tell they haven't read the preface yet. I said, "Well, you got to read the book," because the book is different in that I'm not, as a leader, telling people. I'm telling people as a learner from a great leader, as an admiral's aide in the Navy, a very young, impressionable lieutenant, my second job in the Navy, working every day from probably 3 or 4 in the morning till 8 or 9 o'clock at night to make sure that the execution of the boss, the admiral, was perfect. And that was my job. And there were a lot of failures and there were some successes, but that was the job.
And so your job was to get the admiral to the right place on time.
Right place, right time, right.
Make sure he went to the toilet because he always needed to go to the toilet before he needed to do anything.
Yes. And there, I said this to somebody the other day, and I say this in the book. The rumor is that during that period that you're an admiral's aide, you get to know the admiral better, if not as much as the admiral's spouse, because you were always there with them and you know them both professionally and personally.
I mean, you tell all kinds of stories about because it's kind of like it's the way I see it is a book of short stories.
Yes, sir.
Which is where you say this is the situation. So there was one where you had, let me get this right. There's a car. It's freezing cold in the morning, and one of your jobs is to put the flag of the admiral on the front of the car. But because it's frozen, you couldn't get the flag in, so you had to get somebody with a blowtorch,
right,
to basically to defrost the thing that you put the flag in, and there was all kinds of things where you had to use initiative. You use the admiral's name to do stuff, etc.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I think those are some of the points in the book, right? Be creative, think outside of the box. That was something that, the day before I had tested the yard arm. The yard arm goes down into a hollow pole. That night it's freezing, sleeting, and raining. It freezes over when I go to put it in there. And it's not my admiral's flag. It's the admiral's, that's his boss.
The admiral's flag.
Yeah, the 3-star that's coming in. So it was very important for my boss to get everything right. And, I trying to jam it in at 6 in the morning. It's not going in. And I say, oh my gosh, this thing is frozen. And immediately the only thing I thought is, how do I get a heating element? So I called the person in the public works department that I knew would have a heating element and say, I'm going to be over there in 5 minutes. Please meet me with a blowtorch. And, a fine young sailor was standing out there with the blowtorch when I arrived and was able to heat it up, and we got it done.
So how do you see these stories translating to the world of business?
Yeah, I think a number of things, right? The professionalism, the execution, the can-do attitude, the customer service, the excellence, the attention to detail. Again, I use those in the law firm, and then when I went to my current employer, and even when I was at Delta Airlines, they were the same things, and it was clearly transferable.
I think it certainly seemed to me is that it was you were kind of like doing a leadership course.
Yes.
It was like a basic leadership course just by listening to what or observing what he was doing.
Well, I appreciate that because recently I've spoken to, I had the great honor to speak to about 40 foreign officers who were visiting the United States Naval War College. And they came recently to town for a tour. And that's what I did. They said, hey, would you talk about your current employer? But could you also talk about leadership? I said, I'd be happy to. You know, I said, I enjoyed that more than talking about the current employer, although I love talking about both.
Just to say that we just had a comment from Barack. He says, thanks to me. Well, thank you very much. What do you see as the most critical leadership principle that you learned from the Admiral?
Sure. It's taking care of your people. And in doing so, you allow them the opportunity to professionally and personally move forward, and then others are watching you. Others see how you take care of somebody. I had a young sailor when I was a commanding officer of a squadron in Jacksonville get hurt down in Central America. And I flew down there. I was in the office around the clock, had a team. And for the next 3 weeks, we made sure that even though he was down there, that we got his family down there, and then we got him back 6 months later. And at the end of that time, Tim, a year and a half later, some young sailor came up to me and said, Captain Fava, thanks for your hard work. He said, never will forget how you took care of Petty Officer Smith. We all saw that. And I had no idea. And that is critically important.
I think that's about culture, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Culture starts at the top.
Yes, sir.
And I think as leaders, it's a very lonely place, actually.
Very.
But actually, everybody's watching.
Always watching what you say and what you do. I told somebody else the other day, I had a commanding officer friend of mine that, walking from the parking lot to the building, if he saw a cigarette butt or a piece of paper, he would bend down and pick it up. And guess what? Everybody in the office building is looking outside the office because they want to know when the CO's coming in. Oh, here he comes, here he comes. But they all saw him pick up the piece of paper. And he did the same thing in the head with a piece of toilet paper on the floor. Now, who picks up toilet paper in the bathroom? He did.
And for those, I didn't know until I read Mark's book that the head is a toilet.
Yes.
Or a washroom, if you.
Sorry.
And Paul Wolf says taking care of your people is so important. Absolutely, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for that. So what advice would you have for aspiring leaders?
Yeah, I say always three things: plan, patience, and persistence. And everybody thinks, and we talked about this earlier, everybody thinks when you leave college or leave whatever your school is, your secondary education, that you're going to go from right to point A to point B. And you don't, right? It's a zigzag, right? But if you always have a plan and some patience and persistence, even when people say no, you'll get there. And that's what I've tried to do. Even when a door is closed, I say, okay, how do I either get this door open or go to another door? Because I'm going to get from point A to point B, and it's up to me to do that.
Because you've had quite a, I read recently that I saw recently there was a book called Squiggly Careers,
yes,
which is where there isn't a line, and you've had quite a squiggly career in terms of where you've gone, haven't you? Why did you why did you take this job?
I took the job because it was a challenge. It was the last job I wanted. I wanted to stay. I finished my first job in Jacksonville, Florida. Easy thing to do was stay in Jacksonville and become a flight instructor, a naval flight instructor. And a lawyer grabbed me and said, hey, you'd be great at this job. And I saw it as a challenge, new environment, different place. And that's why I took it. And then from there, you're right. I went into the reserves, went to law school, went to work for a federal judge, to a law firm, to a bigger law firm, to Atlanta to work for Delta Airlines, back to the same law firm, and then with my current employer. But it's all been on that trajectory career that I wanted to be an aviation lawyer. Love airplanes, love the law. How do I do that so that I'm excited about work every day?
And is there one thing that you learned from the Admiral that probably stands out?
We mentioned taking care of people, and the other thing is just how easy it is to express gratitude. So part of that taking care component is just the thank you, right? At the end of every day, no matter how great it was, no matter how long it was, no matter how miserable it was, and even if I'd failed, he'd look at me and say, thank you, shipmate. And I talk about that in the book. We're both aviators, but the term shipmate was a term of endearment, right? It was that bond between me and him as naval officers. And he said, thank you every single day.
Because you talk about in the book about how wherever you went, you would always, you'd get back and you'd sit with the Admiral and you would agree thank you letters that would go out.
Yes. Yeah, we did that too. So it was part of my job on the trip. This was back in the day, all handwritten thank you letters. I would take notes along the way of the trip of who had helped us or had helped him succeed. And he might not even know it. And I would then draft those thank you notes and say, come in with a stack of them, 4 or 5 of them. They're on a beautiful letterhead with the flag on the top, his name. And I said, boss, these are the people we need to thank. He'd read them 90% of the time. He would edit them and then we'd send them out.
And so, I mean, even I'm trying to, the person with the blowtorch that helped
Yes.
you with the flag got a thank you note.
Yeah, absolutely. He got a thank you note. Now we didn't say thank you for having the blowtorch. We said thank you for helping us execute a phenomenal mission for my boss, and that's exactly what he did, without question. Absent that, it would have been a disastrous failure.
And Paul Wolf says, always plan with the end or outcome in mind. Because again, great advice. So how does your naval experience allow you to make tough decisions under pressure?
The biggest thing I learned there, and I try to do today, and I struggle with it both in the Navy and sometimes in the corporate world, is just remaining calm, cool, and collected. Right? It is easy to have your hair on fire, and I have as a junior officer when things are not going well. It is a challenge again because people are always watching you. Is to remain calm, cool, and collected. Go back to the basics and execute that way.
And I think one of the things that you had to do, certainly, is I love some of the stories that you tell in here about how you had to. So, for example, you'd use a transport plane,
right?
And the transport plane would have to land at exactly the right time.
Yes.
In effect, the plane would land. A ladder would come down, and there would be a car, and you'd have to, and it would so it was only when the car was there, you couldn't have the admiral waiting for.
Yeah,
and so you'd have to tell the can you slow down?
Yeah. I mean, that's the attention to detail and the execution. Everything there was based on time and punctuality. And, if we got there early, not good, because he and I are hemming and hawing, and that's just not good use of his time. If we got there late, really bad, because people are expecting us to be on time and are rolling their eyes, looking at the watch, saying, even the admiral's not on time. And that's the same thing in the business world, right? Do what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it.
There's also a story, and for people at our age that remember photocopiers.
Yes.
And you remember, and there's always the time you go to a photocopy and you put something in, and for some reason or other it would miss a page.
Right.
And I think that you one of the learnings was to put numbers on the pages, which is something that I love. And you just go through and go, oh, where's that? Oh, I need to do that one again, because yes. you did the admiral's speech and there was a page missing.
Page was missing in the speech. I remember him going off the notes of the speech. I'm sitting in the audience. He's watching me. I'm watching him, and he looks up at me, and I say, something's wrong. And it was the old-fashioned photocopies machine. A couple of them had got caught up. But again, when I'm scanning pages now to send them in a PDF, they all still have numbers, and I pull up the PDF and I check it to make sure it's accurate. Just a small attention item. So
how do you think that you adapted to the rapid changes in circumstances, and how's that? Is that something that you've now been able to do in your later life?
Yeah, a couple of people have read the book, especially some recent Navy admirals. And I just got a note from a wonderful officer who just got promoted to be an admiral. And he said, Mark, it's not like that anymore. We don't do this. We don't do laundry. I said, yeah, I get it. You'll read at the beginning of the book. It says, this was over 30 years ago. The norms and times have changed. But to me, Tim, the importance is the concepts are timeless, right? So the execution is the same. And we've adapted those rules. Aides no longer get the laundry of the admiral. I got it. That's not why the story is there, right? It was just execution for the boss to make sure things went off flawlessly.
And so what do you think what skill do you think you needed to actually understand that rapid changing? Because there were certain circumstances like the flagging on the car where you had to think so quickly.
Yeah. I just think that mindset, right? It's easy. And I tell this to people that report to me now, it's easy to come to the boss and say, here's the problem. I don't have a solution. Yeah. It's much harder. And what the boss wants is, here's the problem. Here are the 3 options. Here's the solution I recommend. That's just wonderful, because I say, go with it. And I learned that as a follower.
Everybody is a leader.
Yeah, don't bring the problem, bring the solution.
So Andrew Slessor says, and Andrew is a very He's been watching these for a long time. So thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon. That sounds like an amazing planning that requires a very good eye to detail.
Yeah, it's a military phrase, attention to detail. And also a thank you to Paul Wolf, who's a longtime friend of mine and professional colleague.
So do you want to tell us a story that you from the book?
Yeah, the funny one is probably near the end of the book. We talk often about, the meticulous detail of traveling, right? So I always had his rollerboard, his briefcase, and his sword, his ceremonial sword. The last trip we're going on, or one of the last trips, I get to the door, it's dark. He hands me the rollerboard, hands me his sword, scurry back. I come back to the house, and his wife is going to go on this trip with us because back in those days, the admiral's wife was allowed to travel. And he hands me a fur jacket, fur coat in a hanger covered in plastic. And he looks at me and he says, "This is Janie's fur. Take care of it because it's more important to me than my sword." And, immediately I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. And I don't think I used the word kidding in the book. It's one of the 3 or 4 times where I use a curse word in the book. But I realized then that was important to him. And if it was important to him, it was important to me. 3 days later, I was the keeper of the fur and of the sword. We got back, same door, gave it to him, handed it to him. And he said, guess what? He said, "Thank you." He says, "This was very important to me and to her." It's like, okay, mission accomplished. I got it.
I also remember the story that you were renting a car.
Yes.
And the car rental company, because they worked out that he was an admiral, basically upgraded him, which meant he had a supercar, and he didn't want to. He just wanted to have, partly because of he couldn't be seen as driving something a better car than his boss.
Right.
Also,
right.
he didn't want to. He didn't want to go around in a show car. It was just a means of transport.
Yes, sir.
And so you had to have a conversation, didn't you, with the rental company because they kept upgrading him, and you said, no, I don't want an upgrade.
Yeah, it was, and I tried to do it diplomatically so I wouldn't embarrass the person. And so that time I landed this huge, I don't know, it might've been a Lincoln Continental, pulls up and the admiral says, "Please tell me that's not our car." Because we did not want to be seen riding around Washington, D.C. as a 1-star admiral with a bunch of 4-star admirals in a big car. So I got him to the quarters and I drove back and I said, "Look, I can't have this. I need a smaller car." And he swapped it out. And I said, "Never again, please never again upgrade me." and we didn't. And we became great friends. Every time I called him, he says, "That's right, Lieutenant Fava." He says, "I know you don't want to upgrade." I said, "That's right. No upgrades."
So how important do you think mentors are in business? Because in fact, the admiral was a mentor to you, wasn't he?
Critically important. I think the biggest compliment you can have and be is to be a mentor. And I have been mentoring even engineers at my current employer. They're not lawyers, they're not naval aviators, they're just engineers. And it's all about what you said. How do you be successful in life? How do you have work-life balance? How do you do family, work, and something else well? I call it the 3 things. And the ability to share that with people and encourage them has just been a great honor of mine and very fulfilling. It means a lot more to me than the good feeling of doing good work, is if you can transfer that bit of knowledge to somebody else as a mentor.
So in a way, your book is part of your legacy, isn't it?
I sure hope so. I've had a couple of people reach out to me recently, and including some young naval officers, and say, "Hey, could I talk to you?" And I said, "Look, everything I'm going to tell you is in the book." And you're right. It's a very quick read. It was purposely made that way. I heard somebody say, somebody said, "I don't like hardback books, they're too heavy." I said, "Get this one. It's this big and it'll fit very well in your carry-on." So I hope it does become a legacy. And I've got
there's a guy called Rob Fitzgerald, and he writes thin books. There's a book called he's written a book called Write Useful Books, and part of it, he said, is don't make them too long because people won't read them.
Yes, I've got 3 or 4 on my nightstand that have bookmarks in them at some semblance of being finished.
So what legacy do you want to leave, Mark?
I think taking care of people, treating people well, and just an overall happiness, both in your professional and personal life. And that's not easy for any of us, right? It's not all rosy, but the ability to read the book and understand that that's a possibility.
So we've had one comment from LinkedIn user. Agree, Mark. Mentorship is critical to professional growth. LinkedIn user, reason why it comes up with that is you have to give your permissions in LinkedIn for LinkedIn to share your data, just so you know that. And another one from Paul Wolf. Thank you, Paul, for your comments today. People appreciate mentorship, and you can also mentor mentors. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Mark, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, Lessons from the Admiral, Naval Wisdom and Sea Stories for Leaders. Mark, if I wanted to buy a copy, where can I get a copy?
Same place. Just head to the website, any major retailer, and Amazon also obviously has a bunch of them.
And where can we find you, Mark?
MarkCFava.com is the best place. And I respond to everything in about 24 hours. I promise you I'll do that.
Excellent. Mark, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. Great book. Really enjoyed it. I spent a lovely weekend basically turning the pages and reading about your stories when you work for the Admiral. So thank